Imagine for a second that you're about to do the impossible. You're about to fly faster than the speed of sound, something a lot of smart people think will literally rip your plane to pieces. But you're also hiding a secret, a really painful one. This is the story of a pilot who was larger than life, and the day he punched a hole in the sky. So, just 2 nights before this historic flight, our pilot, Chuck Yeager, decides to go for a horse ride out in the pitch-black Mojave Desert. He gets thrown, and he breaks 2 ribs. Now he knows if he tells anyone in charge, they'll ground him immediately. His shot at history, gone.
He gets his ribs taped up on the sly by a local vet. But now he has a huge problem. He can barely move his right arm. And to fly this plane, he has to reach across his body with a lot of force to lock the cockpit hatch shut. With 2 broken ribs, there's just no way. So how on earth is he going to fly?
Well, his solution was just pure Yeager. He tells a flight engineer about his problem, and the guy saws off about 9 inches of a broom handle. Yeager smuggles this little piece of wood into the cockpit and, in pain, uses it as a lever to get enough leverage to seal the hatch. And with that, he was ready to go.
You see, that whole story, the broken ribs, keeping it a secret, the makeshift broom handle lever, that's not just some crazy anecdote. It's the absolute key to understanding the kind of man who had what would later be called the right stuff.
That kind of cool-headed thinking under pressure wasn't a fluke. It was something forged in the heat of combat over years and years. So to really get this mission, you first have to get the man. So who was Chuck Yeager?
I mean, think about it. You have to pick one person for this incredibly dangerous, high-stakes mission. Out of 125 of the absolute best pilots in the world, the head of the Flight Test Division, Major General Boyd, said it was one of the hardest choices he ever made. But he needed someone totally unflappable. And in his words, Yeager came up number 1.
And it wasn't just his bosses who thought so. His fellow pilots saw it too. Major General Ascani put it perfectly. He said Yeager flew a plane as if he was welded to it, like he was part of the machine. It wasn't just skill, it was this deep, intuitive feel for any plane he stepped into.
So what was his secret sauce? Well, it was this incredible mix of things. For starters, he had 20/10 vision. That's better than perfect, so he could spot enemy planes long before they ever saw him. He grew up hunting in West Virginia, which made him a master at deflection shooting, hitting a fast-moving target. He also had this natural engineer's mind. He could just absorb complex mechanical concepts instantly. And of course, he was a World War II combat ace who once shot down 5 enemy planes in a single day.
But, a pilot like that is only half of the equation. The other half was the machine itself. This radical, rocket-powered plane built for one purpose, to fly straight through a wall of sound.
And here she is, the Bell X-1. Yeager nicknamed her Glamorous Glennis, after his wife. Now look at the shape. It doesn't really look like a plane, does it? It's shaped like a .50 caliber machine gun bullet. And there's a good reason for that, because that's basically what they were trying to do. They were trying to fire a person through the air.
And the thing they were trying to break through was the sound barrier. Back then, people didn't think of it as just a number. It was seen as a very real, physical wall in the sky. The belief was that the shockwaves building up around a plane would become so intense that the aircraft would just disintegrate. In fact, a famous British test pilot had died just a year earlier trying to do the very same thing. The danger was absolutely real.
Now, on an earlier test flight, Yeager had hit the big problem. As he got close to the speed of sound, around Mach 0.94, the shockwaves forming on the wings made his controls completely useless. He couldn't steer the plane up or down. But an engineer named Jack Ridley came up with a brilliant idea. He said, instead of using these small flaps on the tail to control the plane, why don't we just move the entire tail itself? This flying tail, as it was called, was the key. It was the piece of engineering that made supersonic flight possible. So you've got the perfect man for the job, and you've got the perfected machine. That brings us back to the day itself, the day they were going to try and punch that hole in the sky. October 14th, 1947. Muroc Air Base, out in the middle of the California desert. The stage was set for history. You have to understand, just getting this thing into the air was an ordeal. The X-1 didn't have enough fuel to take off on its own, so they loaded it into the bomb bay of a massive B-29 bomber and carried it up to 25,000 feet. Then, Yeager had to climb down a flimsy ladder, with 2 broken ribs, remember, into the tiny freezing cockpit. Then, the B-29 crew just dropped him.
He'd be in a free fall for a few seconds before he could finally light the rocket engine. So he's dropped. He fires all 4 rocket chambers at once. The plane accelerates like you wouldn't believe. He said it was like being kicked by a mule. The needle on the Mach meter starts jumping around wildly, and then it flies right off the scale. For the very first time, a human being was moving faster than the sound he was making. He hit Mach 1.06.
So what was it like? What did it feel like to break through this terrifying, deadly barrier? In his classic, calm West Virginia drawl, Yeager's official report was that it was smooth as a baby's bottom. All that violent shaking just vanished, and the ride became a perfectly paved speedway.
This single flight, it wasn't just about a new speed record. It kicked open the door to the entire jet age. It paved the way for space travel, and it created a whole new kind of American hero. This is the legacy.
But here's maybe the strangest part of the whole story. This incredible, world-changing thing happens. And then, crickets. Silence. No newspaper headlines, no parades, nothing. Why on earth would one of the greatest achievements in aviation history be kept top secret?
Well, the answer comes down to 2 words: Cold War. That flying tail design was a massive military advantage. By keeping the whole thing classified, the US military got what Yeager himself called a quantum leap over the Soviet Union. It gave them about 5 years to build a whole new generation of supersonic fighters before the other side even knew it was possible.
And when the story finally did become public years later, it turned Yeager into a legend. The author Tom Wolfe eventually made him the star of his famous book, The Right Stuff, where he called Yeager the most righteous of all the possessors of the right stuff, the ultimate example of a person with that special, unteachable quality of grace under pressure.
Which kind of brings us back to the beginning and leaves us with one last question. What does it really mean to have the right stuff? Is it the superhuman vision, the instinctive skill with a machine, the courage you learn in combat, or is it something simpler? Is it just the guts and ingenuity to use a sawed-off broom handle to get the job done when everything is on the line? Maybe the right stuff isn't just one of those things. Maybe it's the rare combination of all of them.